Welcome back. Thank you for staying with Inside Politics. Of course, we continue with a discussion just highlighting some of the key issues in the proposals within the BBI report. Mark Bichachi, I know you've been holding on to your thoughts. This is your time. Just talk to us about what you think about what has been said so far in terms of a gender parity quest, in terms of the expanded legislature. And a lot has been mentioned, especially by Kipchumba, in terms of the office of the Ombudsman. What do you think about it?
You know, if you leave out the fact that God resurrected Jesus, then history would only write that Jesus was killed. Similarly, in this case, if you leave out the fact that the president is not unilaterally choosing whoever he wants as an ombudsman, you will totally misread the facts. Let's start here. Any constitutional office or officer appointed by the president is appointed via a rigorous recruitment that is advertised to the public. The shortlist is put in the newspapers, and the president is given a list of 3 names to choose from. That is true not only of the judicial ombudsman if he is so appointed, but it is also true of the Auditor General. In fact, as we sit here, it is true of the Chief Justice himself. So the idea that the president is appointing people without telling Kenyans the truth, that there will be a competitive process by which eligible candidates and candidates which should be of proper character are selected, is to mislead the Kenyan people. It is equally misleading to say that people in Senate, women elected to Senate, is tokenism towards gender representation. Because I assure you, 47 of those people elected there will actually be women. They're not chocolate women, they're not strawberry women, they're women of the Homo sapien species. So to say that is tokenism towards the gender parity issue is not true. The truth of the matter is this: it is good to critique a document, and I applaud us for doing so. But we also need to do it with a spirit of truth and candor to the Kenyan people. And to say things that inflame emotions without providing them with sufficient information for them to make informed decisions, then we would be doing this nation a great disservice. You know, we pick and choose and say, for example, that the Senate is being weakened. It is impossible to weaken a Senate by bolstering its numbers. It is impossible to weaken the Senate's responsibility while at the same time increasing the amount of money to 35% of what the Senate ideally oversees. On top of that, it is also a logical fallacy to say that because the government struggles in delivering 15%, we should not even try to move to 35%. I will inform Kenyans that the government of Kenya does not have reserves. We are a developing country, aka we are poor. We literally live as a country hand to mouth. It is not just devolution that waits for funds. Every government department has to wait for funds because the Kenya government requires to tax you and me and for us to pay on time in order for them to be able to deliver. So connecting delays in 15% to 35% is a logical fallacy. And just because your father brought you small chocolate last month late does not mean that when he promises you a bicycle today, you will say, I don't want your bicycle because the chocolate was late. What logic is that?
All right, Dismas Mukua, before Kipchumba, you give us your take. Dismas Mukua, I mean, you highlighted a couple of issues to do with the timeliness of implementation, how exactly it will be implemented. But one of our viewers has just highlighted that it will be scheduled with timeframes in the annex report. Some policies and legislations are supposed to be implemented within 6 months of adoption, all the way to 2 years. As you reply to that, also give us your take, quite briefly, on the gender parity issue, because in my understanding, if the 47 women as senators actually are against a bill, there's no way that that bill will go through.
Having gone through the report a couple of times and looking at the female issue, when you say that we are going to have 47 female senators and 47 male senators, I don't know why anybody would be disappointed with that proposal, because we are not even talking about 2/3 or a third. We are talking 50-50. Both the male and female legislators will have the same power. So how does one then have the guts to say that that's a tokenism? You're going to have 47 females seated at the Senate taking decisions. That's why I said earlier on, what we must ensure is the quality of the people we elect to the National Assembly, to the Senate, and also the County Assembly, so that when they go there, they're able to think on their feet, that they've got a global understanding of issues, and their voting is anchored on national and public interest. For me, I'd like somebody who says that this is a tokenism to give us another formula, whether it's supposed to be all female or all male. Because, the first level is to ensure that there's a provision of having these females in these decision-making tables. The second idea is ensure that the people who are seated there have got capacity. So it's up to Mura to ensure that the people she's going to be voting in as females to occupy these positions are heavyweights. And also it's incumbent on the party leaders to ensure that the clearance method, that they attract top quality talent to run for these positions. But since the provision is there for 47, that's something that we must applaud. And also when you talk about the implementation matrix, first of all, when you look at the proposed bills, it seems that they were done in a hurry. So there's an opportunity for them to be concretized, but there must be a very solid implementation matrix with very clear timelines on what is supposed to be done. I've gone through what the caller says, but it's a blanket statement. It does not offer details. It just says we're supposed to be doing what. It now needs to be very clear that if you are proposing to have 60 bills, when are they going to be passed? Who is going to be responsible? Where does the buck stop? But more importantly is about IBC. Because, we can beat around the bush, but that's the crux of the matter. That IBC, we need to isolate the key issues to ensure that at all times, when IBC pronounces somebody a winner, everybody goes home knowing that the same person is a winner. And forget about these other 5 elections. The election which brings the nation to a standstill is the presidential. So it's very unacceptable. It's actually sad, almost demeaning, for Chebukati to issue a media statement and say that as far as is concerned, up to 90% of the elections were done in a very solid manner, and it's only one election which was in trouble. Believe you me, majority of Kenyans do not care who becomes governor, who becomes senator, who becomes MCA somewhere, but every Kenyan is interested in ensuring that it's about the presidency, that the person who is declared the president has actually won. And I think Chebukati should be embarrassed. He must be reminded that the Supreme Court said that the presidential election was marred by irregularities and illegalities, and if he was a respectable Kenyan, he should have taken the first opportunity to resign, because he's the one who is responsible for creating systems that deliver free, fair, and credible elections. And then right now he has the guts to say that the 2 BBI architects are picking him out, and he's been a success. So as far as he's concerned, he's a success. But when you go to the parents and relatives of Baby Pendo and other people who lost their lives and their properties because of the way he mishandled the election, they would want to give him a piece of their minds.
Well, radical changes to the election laws are being proposed. It seems to be musical chairs at the IEBC, but I have to give Jerotich the right of reply. It seems your comments seem to suggest that it's all about tokenism. Well, what's your say on this? But even as you add on that, you're quite critical of the BBI document as it is. Are there any wins for Wanjiku in your perspective? What exactly can the common Mwananchi take home and say, this has made my life easier or better, bearing in mind the current economic times we live in?
Look, thank you so much, Jesse. I think I want to be very clear. The question I would pose to Kenyans and to my fellow panelists, my brothers there, would be to say, is there no way that we can attain and achieve gender parity without increasing the numbers of legislators? That is what I'm trying to say, that if we are going to, or if the only way we're going to attain gender parity, be it at 2/3, 1/3, or 50%, is by increasing the numbers. We're getting to a point when Wanjiku, Morache, Poech, Anyango will not be able to afford that wage bill. So I am challenging us to say we can attain gender parity within the current numbers. And the thing I'm going to say also about the 47, if you're shifting them from the National Assembly to the Senate, I do agree that at some point you need to allow for some additional numbers. But if the only way we're going to attain gender parity is by bloating an already bloated legislature, then I am not for that. But in terms of gender parity, the proposals have been there. They have been floated numerously. In fact, it was the parliament that failed to enact necessary legislation. And in fact, one of the big challenges or big fights against gender parity, the not more than 2/3 gender rule, was they said it was expensive. And it wasn't expensive according to some studies that were done by the National Women's Steering Committee. But ultimately what we have today is if we're going to say to achieve gender parity, we need more and more and more. I'm not for that. We can find solutions within the current numbers that we have, and that's what I'm encouraging. If I was an ordinary Kenyan who did not understand all the politics invested in the BBI document, as a young person, I'd say, okay, 7 years of a tax break is not a bad thing at all. And there are a couple of good things here and there that you can say might apply to me as a Kenyan, as the ordinary Wanjiku. But I would say there are many cookies in that jar for Kenya. But the cookie factory is still owned by a few. It is an elite compact between a few. And that is why I have been so utterly critical of the BBI document from its very inception. And I want to really underscore that repeal-style proposals masquerading as innocuous administrative changes or ameliorative amendments to the Constitution of Kenya will not pass muster when it comes to my assessment of the BBI. If we want to repeal the Constitution of Kenya 2010, let us call it that. Let us not hide behind amendments and little changes here and there and have this plethora that ultimately looks like an overhaul of the Constitution. Let's call it that. If we want to repeal, let's start the repeal process. But let's not hide amendments in there that are actually not ameliorative, but they're ultimately transformative and take us away from what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was all about. Thanks for this.
All right, we definitely have to give Oliver Kipchumba time to give his thoughts right now. Oliver, I mean, Wakili, a lot has been said. Your thoughts on what has been said. Also, in your context of the BBI, what wins are there?
Thank you, Jesse. Sorry, I think my good friend and senior Kaikai looked at me in a bad way, so I was I don't know what was happening. But I'm back. I think, first of all, is to correct Bichachi, that when some of us go through the documents of BBI, we go through the documents of BBI with a background, having read all the around 14 submitted documents from each region. And when we do so, we do not suffer analytical indigestion. We do not suffer mediocre anxiety. So that one should be underlined. And when it comes to the issue of reading this document, I have read the document from corner to corner. I have gone back to read the document that came from my personal region, which is in Uasin Gishu. We submitted a document that talked about something called guaranteed minimum returns. The same has not been factored elsewhere. I have read the document submitted by the Ma community, and I have again gone through the document submitted by the coastal region. And there is something, Jesse, in chapter 5 of the Constitution that has not been addressed, which is the cornerstone of our problems. Whereas people fight in this country because of elections, it is because of pent-up anger that comes from the issue of resource allocation in this country. And that goes to the question of land. If you do not talk about the issue of land regimes in this country, the issue, when you read even the proposed bills of parliament, there is no bill that amends the issue of land, the maximum and minimum acreage holding. Why is that bill still being held at the office of the majority leader. Those are some of the things we need to look. Whereas we have the wins, and I can start by saying the win in terms of having the office of the official opposition leader is a win, because it gives us a chance to see the person who became number 2, what they can do outside government. The issue on women, although it is cosmetic, but it is the first time we are trying to see something with a semblance of the country taking a serious discussion about women. I wouldn't want to call the issue on youth a win, because in there lies a lot of questions that must be asked. Helping the youth of this country, Jesse, is not about forming a commission to them. What the youth lack in this country is opportunities. They have been sucked up by black monopolists. You will get tomorrow a tycoon opening a company with the name of Kipchumba, and he will accrue the issues like the tax holiday, the 7-year, will go to the tycoon, not me, the person who will have used to open the company. When it comes to issues of health, that thing can be given by the current chairman, Ekwe Duro. We did not need BBI to give an health break to the people who are taking help so that they can stabilize after leaving school. So I think, whereas we have several things that if well applied or well intending, they can achieve something bigger. And when it comes to, maybe as a finality, Jesse, to the issues of the 35% increment, there is a problem that as a country we need to address. The issue of the national debt. We have not as a country sat down and discussed the issue of our debt ceiling. And even the 35% we have given ourselves. We had 15% in the current constitution, and that was the ground level, which means we had no ceiling. If a president and if our economics agree, the president can even give 65% to the counties. But the problem is here. Currently, we collect 1.6 trillion, of which we use 9 or 1 billion to pay debt. And the remaining, we use 560 to pay our current salaries. So which means we remain with a little around 159 billion for development and to go to counties. It means generally, Jason, currently we are borrowing to fund devolution. And I believe if the BBI is to be an honest discussion about our status as a people, we cannot carry more than we have. We need to say, look at it here. We cannot promise devolution more than we can deliver. It is not about the people in power. It is about the economic realities. So I think, so that we do not go to the future with things we cannot carry. And also, it is unfortunate that we change constitutions not for posterity, but for election.
Okay, Kipchumba, this point is home. Mark Bichachi, I'd love to hear what you have to say, especially since, according to Kipchumba, forming a youth commission will not generally satisfy the thirst for employment, for opportunities for the youth. I think you're quite on the forefront in terms of the youth agenda. Bichachi, what do you have to say about all this?
Let's start here. We are again doing what I warned against us from doing, reading the BBI report in parts without telling Kenyans the full story. We need to understand that the Youth Commission is not just a single peg of the BBI. There is more. Let us start talking about the business hubs that are supposed to be created across the country. There is no better way to create jobs in the modern world than incubating businesses. It does not mean that every youth is an entrepreneur. It does mean, though, that every youth who is an entrepreneur has a place they can go where they'll receive advice, support, and resources to be able to achieve their dream. And let me tell you, for every single entrepreneur you empower, you must rest assured that at least they'll employ a secretary, an accountant, a HR manager, a finance manager, and so on and so forth. So we must, as a country, as a developing country, boost our entrepreneurial space. And that is something that is firmly within the BBI, and it is targeted at the youth. In as much as we would like to say that the 7-year tax holiday will only benefit the people who are already rich because they will use the youth. That is assuming that a youth is incapable of registering a business and enjoying that 7-year tax break and succeeding as a business person. When I came to Nairobi, I wish I had a 2-year tax break. Forget about 7 years. It would have greatly changed my fortune. And look at me today, employing Kenyans. So we must understand, when we ask government to create employment, we are not talking about what used to happen in the 70s and 80s, where you would finish campus and immediately be taken up by the government. Those days are so far gone. Governments today across the world, and I beg you to show me different, are in the business of creating policies that then convert to jobs for young people. Let us dissect this document with the veracity required to show the people exactly what is in the document. On the issue of representation,
briefly, sir.
I must state that I was hoping for a zebra proportional representation in Parliament, so that we do away with constituencies and we bring about a true gender parity and party voting in the country.
Okay,
that
Bichachi.
Unfortunately is not in the debate.
Okay, Bichachi, let's take a short break right now. I know a lot has to be said in response. Dismas Mukua, I can see you smiling, as well as Kakai Kissinger, who must have a lot to say in terms of the wins and for Wanjiku in the BBI report. We'll definitely be back with that, including your call. Definitely anticipating what you have to say. Just taking a look at what people are mentioning on social media. Simon Kamau Warui says, we only need to implement the constitution fully and comply with it and the law. We don't need the divisive BBI. Well, Kakai, you have your work cut out for you to actually convince Simon Kamau right there that BBI has some goodies for them back at home. Your call coming up next. Do give us your take live right here on Inside Politics. We take that short break. We'll be back in a jiffy.